Exactly. All right.
Well, I was going to try and get 10 seconds of silence, but Robin ruined it.
Hey, you didn't say nothing about silence.
You should have known. There's
I
always
wasn't paying attention. I was reading about this thing on Kickstarter.
Well, we'll get to that thing on Kickstarter, or is it another thing on Kickstarter? Because knowing you squirreled.
Yeah, that's true. But no, it's about the thing that we're talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. That's good. Probably more than I read of it. I tried to read it earlier, but I was busy today. Anyways. Hey folks, welcome to episode 136. Yeah, I know there's kind of a number disparity right now. I'm going to call those the lost episodes, and they will come out sometime soon. I promise.
Uh-huh.
I swear.
Believe that when I see it.
Damn it, Robin! You're supposed to be in my corner.
I am. Okay. From behind.
Well, that just got creepy. Anyways... We also have Tony with us.
Hello there.
And he's here because he is one of the people behind Zone Raiders, which has actually been causing a little bit of a stir, a cyberpunk game on Kickstarter. And we'll be talking about that some throughout the day and all that. But first off, Tony, how are you doing today?
Sorry, to repeat that, you just broke up. The internet is a magical place where we can make games on it, but yet making a basic call and getting voice is somehow hard.
Ah, I see. Well, I was just asking, how are you doing today?
Oh, today's been absolutely fantastic. Been getting hammered by the worldwide weather change of whatever the heck is making outside cold and my life miserable. But aside from that, everything's going peachy, you know?
I see. And that's because you're out in California where it's never supposed to be cold.
Yeah, I think part of the privilege of being a Californian is the right to never, ever have weather, like mortal beings.
There you go.
But my hubris. Oh, no.
Yes, unfortunately, the world doesn't always listen to that request. Or sometimes it does and it laughs and goes, oh, no, I'm sorry. Here you go. So, awesome, cool. Hey, Robin, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Can't complain. Workshops are trucking along.
There you go.
Models are exploding. We're just working on a sculpt earlier today for a museum, and the computer ended up crashing as it was rendering, so I got to start all over again. So, all kinds of exciting and fun.
My condolences.
Yeah,
well,
thank you.
Yeah, that kind of sucks. All right, cool. Now we got the pleasantries out of the way. Well, let's get into the good stuff. What is on everyone's painting table?
Well, maybe I'll just start off. Just finished painting a wide swath of minis for that project we're going to talk about a little bit, but also a pile of Infinity minis. So for
which you can probably use in that same other project.
Sure, amongst other things, they're great minis.
They are. They're great. Actually, I have some sitting somewhere right here. I thought, here's one. I ironically get into a science fiction like cyberpunk game, and what do I pick up? I pick up Ariadne, U.S. Ariadne. So they're as low tech as you can get in the science fiction future.
Had to play Americans in your fantastic world of werewolves and aliens and cyberpunk people.
I know, right? He's got space ninjas that go invisible, and he chooses the guys who just stick leaves to their helmets. I mean, come on.
But they do have the werewolves. They do have werewolves. So,
And
they're guys with assault rifles who are just trying to pay their way through college.
Sure, fair.
Yeah. I did get it wasn't Cold Front. Cold Front's the newest one. Ice Storm. Mm-hmm. I did pick that up. That was my introduction into it. I wasn't a big fan of the Pano stuff, even though I like Knights. I don't know why I'm not a big fan of it. But I did pick up Nomads and a bunch of other Nomads. and I think I have some Tohas kicking around here somewhere. So, I did pick up some of the other stuff, but the army that I painted pretty much everything for and have the most of is Ariadna. I don't know. They just appealed to me. They were so cool and so random.
They are pretty cool. I mean, like, just for modern styled soldiers, there's some of the most tactical, high speed, low drag looking guys you can get at great scales with good looking weapons and gear.
And they even have guys that, for some reason, run around with bows and arrows and shoot people.
Well, yeah.
Because, I mean, you have to go back in technology.
No, it's not going back. It's maintaining and modifying. Because, I mean, it is, effectively an exploding arrow.
Those guys are pretty cool, the bow and arrow American dudes, because they're basically one of those outdoor, I will survive with my pile of guns and my wife and this mountain of food and gold types. So, that was their shtick, which is kind of cool.
Exactly.
On your space werewolf planet.
That is true.
I actually converted a Scarface tag to have its own bow. So, I'm not going to knock the bow.
Interesting. So, Robin, what's on your painting desk?
Well, I recently painted a Viking for an upcoming Viking game that I hear about occasionally.
There was actually an article put on Beast of War today about it.
Yeah, I saw that. It's kind of impressive. It's like a legitimate thing.
Yeah,
is that a new one coming out, or
it's not a Kickstarter. It's coming out from Osprey. It's called Ragnarok: Heavy Metal Combat in the Viking Age.
Yeah, the big joke, if you haven't been a listener for a while or anything, is that Tim is the author, Tim being the other guy who's supposed to be on this podcast. He's taking a break right now in order to focus on the book and make sure that everything gets out the door appropriately, right? So that's why I am here.
Book, new kids. I mean, there's a lot going on in his life.
Little distractions.
Yeah,
exactly.
Those little things that prevent you from playing with toy soldiers in a non-serious way.
Yeah.
So his book's coming out pretty soon. Was there an official release date yet?
So it was supposed to come out at Adepticon, but it did get pushed back. I don't know if he's officially announced that it got pushed back, so I may be releasing some privileged information. But it's slated for May release last I was told.
Well, I don't remember signing any kind of NDA, so there we go.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I've been working on that. I've been working on some Rec Age in order to get ready for Adepticon. I'm going to be trying to take some ARC troopers up to Adepticon for that. And then I've got to paint up a couple of iguans or lizard folk for Relic Blade.
Nice. Yes, you do have to get your iguans painted up because you did sign up for the Relic Blade event at Adepticon, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And so I got to figure out what that means and what rules do I need to remember and all that kind of business.
So it's going to be 100, 125, and 150 point games.
All right. Hey, see, I don't have to learn anything. I just got to get you to tell me everything.
Well, yeah. I mean, since I'm one of the ones putting it on and I'm supplying all the terrain, you deciding to get your company to pay for you to go to Chicago for work and just coinciding with Adepticon really screwed up my plans of making you my mule for all the terrain.
What a coincidence.
So once again, I have to drive to Adepticon.
Well, we all make our life decisions.
It sounds like while you're playing, you should just have them go, Rob. You should have them just go and tell you the rules in your ear with a little earpiece or something. Do one of those 1980s romantic comedy things of now make a melee attack.
Oh no! I'm not that subtle with this. No. It's going to be screaming across the table. Hey, Nick! I already do that with Infinity periodically with some of our local players. I used to play a lot. I've kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit. So whenever I do get to go play, there's a lot of I know roll a d20. Now what?
Is a 20 good? A 20 is normally good, isn't it? Oh wait, no, this is Infinity. A 20 is bad. I think.
You don't want to roll too high. You don't want to roll too low. You want to roll too medium.
Right?
Exactly.
Infinity is all about rolling medium.
Hey, I'm all about mediocrity, so that's why I love Infinity so much.
Oh, and by the way, the stuff that you're working on for Wreck Age probably would also work for aforementioned cyberpunk game, because those ARC troopers are kind of cyberpunky.
This is true. They do have that kind of vibe and that feel for it. So why don't we go ahead and stop beating around the bush, because I know that's probably getting on people's nerves. Let's actually talk about this game. So this is Zone Raiders. Currently on Kickstarter. We've got a couple more days left. And that's about it as far as what I know. But that's why we've got Tony.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It's like a pleasure to just jump on here and talk about it with you, since you guys are, we're all really passionate gamers. And this has been a literal passion project on creating something that I'd felt that wasn't really on the market for folks, which is like an open model skirmish miniatures game where you can use any models you own in like a sci-fi, cyberpunk, post-apoc combination setting that at the same time has its own very unique kind of story and background, but yet can withstand, having all your random guys be in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, after you.
Oh, no, I was just going to start trying to dive into some of what makes this game, unique from, Infinity, since we mentioned it a couple times. Kind of hailed as the, other than, open model, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah,
sure. Like one big part of it is that the main focus of the game is being a kind of this 5 to 10 member squad level skirmish where you'll have campaign as a major option in the same vein as kind of Frostgrave or Necromunda, where your characters can level up and you can gain new abilities, rare equipment that you find during missions, but as well as a couple of unique wrinkles. Like we've got co-op, where 2 players can combine their teams to fight against enemy AI enemies in cooperative scenarios, as well as other kinds of very specific mechanics based around making the game both simple, strategically deep, but also give you cool things like hypermobility. Like your guys can grappling hook up ledges around barricades and climb up and shove people off into lava and things like that, which make it really very cinematic in how we wanted this to go down.
Ooh, shove people into lava. I like that one.
Yeah, it's been a big effort to kind of just go and say, what are the cool things that we think should happen in a game, and how can we make them happen without adding a billion rules to get there, to melt your brain? Since there's a lot of great games out there, a lot of great models, but not every game is for everybody. There's ones that try for different things, like kind of aiming for different results, and some are more on the lots of finicky rules for each character to give them a billion little modes they can do, and other ones are just let's roll some dice and laugh about it. And I want to find like a really happy medium that's accessible to everybody, but rewards you for also playing well.
Okay, interesting. So tell me more.
So the game takes place in this vast future. That's what's called Zone Raiders, Deadly Skirmishes of the Post-Singularity, where the descendants of mankind had built a giant kind of mechanized world, a Dyson sphere, a huge structure that's bigger than basically comprehension. And then at some point they disappeared. And what's left is this great structure is decaying, and inside, trapped around like different levels of this concentric circle called Matryoshka, are the various kinds of survivors who your parties represent. The soldiers, adventurers, intelligent robots, mutants, cyborg supermen, who have kind of grown into the civilization that was left behind as kind of like the evolution of high-tech hunter-gatherers, where maybe people don't know how to read, but they know how to build a railgun because there's just parts lying around. And that lets you kind of really theme out, like, you can be anything from kind of the inspirations we had from certain kinds of anime to kind of more Starship Troopers-y or kind of militant armored knight orders, all the way to kind of like xenomorphs and mutants and creatures who have these kinds of very alien biologies. And all of them are ways you can stat your characters from models you own into the game, while at least having it also make sense and giving them all very unique abilities.
Awesome. I kind of like the idea of can't read, but can slap a railgun together because there's just the stuff for it laying around.
Yeah. Yeah. And since there's so many different realms of this world, that's where you might find familiar-looking armored knight guys who might be firing explosive bolt cannons that their ancestors left them and things like that.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Explosive bolt rocket cannon thingies.
All right. So, how does the game kind of work? What are some of your core mechanics?
So some of the core mechanics are that in these skirmish games, a lot of the fun comes from the narrative, right? Who's played a lot of these kind of campaign skirmish games perhaps in the past have had a case where, we had a guy who took a wound and became maybe crippled, but they were such a sweet, badass that they went and defeated like the most powerful enemies and continued to like survive to become like the hero of the campaign. I really wanted to play up those elements. And so a lot of it is based on kind of, you can have people who are going to evolve based on what they're doing over the course of a game. In the middle of a battle, a random roll at the beginning where you determine initiative for this alternating activation system might cause a random event to happen where a chest of ancient gear might be in the battlefield, or a cryo chamber containing a mysterious survivor. If you go and retrieve the gear, a guy might get an ancient, artifact firearm that uses unknown energies and is fantastically powerful but dangerous to use, all while avoiding kind of these narrative obstacles in the way, such as both the other players and things like radiation clouds or nano clouds that might try to eat them alive. The play, like I mentioned before, alternates so that no one's ever actually waiting that long. So you kind of activate one person at a time. You can activate more than one based on kind of the level of your leader of your group. And it's a single D20 system where most of the numbers are based on rolling equal to or under a target number. And because we all know D20s are cursed and they never roll the way we want, a lot of the skill comes in the fact that if you played smart, your D20 is given a modifier to go in, like a really obvious big modifier. So you're not trying to do advanced calculus in the back of your head, like, say, in Infinity, when you have to roll certain kinds of dice. So that if you take your shot and you're a shooting skill 10, you need a 10 or less. But if you kind of flank the target, have somebody target designate them, and then are attacking from a high ground, they're completely screwed, and you might have as much as like a +8 bonus to that.
Nice. Okay. So what made you decide to go with a D20 system?
There's a lot of things about D20s that are interesting about them as dice that I think people might feel various ways about. One thing is everyone has them. Not everyone necessarily has like a big old chalk pile full of D12s lying around, although, most people might. But D20s allow you to have lots of little increments. So you might go and say, plus or minus 2, that's 10%. That's really easy to calculate in your head. And by having a single die that's relying on these numbers, or maybe a reroll every now and then to mitigate odds, that's a more straightforward and easy to play system than say, I'm going to roll a fistful of D6s and then count up some results, which you can actually just math out as being equivalent in many ways to saying, this is 30%. So that's this, we can easily figure out what that should be in a D20. A lot of good reasons for using D20s.
All right, interesting. I was curious. Actually, I don't know if you're familiar with the DGS's game Free Blades, and
I've not, unfortunately, had a chance to play that.
Okay. I've only played a little bit of it, but they, just interestingly enough, and I was going through some of my dice the other day, actually trying to sort some of them out, and I found like a D26 or something like that, a D32. I mean, like all these really weird dice. So it just rattling around in my head, how do people decide what system they're going to use? We mentioned and poked fun at Tim, but Tim's a big adherent to the 2d6 system, so that you have that bell curve. It's all mathed out. Yep. Some people really like D10s, so, it's always interesting what, in your development, what made you go, what, a D20 is good to use for X game, for X reasons.
Well, I guess just to start going into that entire aspect of why dice are interesting to us gamers, that kind of falls under two different categories of how dice work, right? You either have a a linear distribution, meaning every single number has the exact same chance of being rolled, a single D6, for example, or a single D20 or D10, or some kind of curve or probabilistic estimate where 2D6 has like that really nice curve where you know exactly where you are and you can up it and down it. And people have used 2D6s forever. Or those systems where you roll buckets of dice and you kind of have this system where your rolls get more even the more dice you roll, because that's what happens if you roll, 100 D6s. And so in this case, I didn't want people to have to worry about, for example, in a 2D6 type game or a 2D10 type game, if you add a couple of mods, the results are guaranteed. A few negatives, and you're almost certainly guaranteed to get a low score. A few positives, and you're almost certainly guaranteed to get a high score. By making it flat, but then having big mods, you're able to really easily control that, okay, you can have a few big mods without making it no longer a matter of a little bit of chance.
Okay. I find it interesting. So one of the things I know I encountered it earlier in the earlier when I was flipping through the Kickstarter and stuff like that, was very much things that screamed parkour and Matrix and things like that, like running on walls, being able to jump over certain things. How is that accomplished in the game?
So one of the objectives of the game was that we've seen amazing battlefields in many games before, like great terrain, awesome workmanship, looks like a diorama of a movie. The problem with that always for me was that oftentimes that would actually be terrible to play on because the game wasn't designed around that. Maybe the game wasn't designed around you having too much cover or obstacles in your way. Or maybe the game was designed where very specific kinds of terrain are needed to play. Otherwise, you get cut down by enemy reaction fire and that sort of thing. So what I wanted to do to get around that was to make the terrain more interactive, where if your troops, you buy you hire troops for your force, and you then can equip them with weapons and armor. And some armor comes with this mobility gear so that you have a reason to have lighter armor and heavier armor. So people with medium and light armor might be able to go and say, for my turn, instead of moving and shooting in my 2-action turn, I would launch a grappling hook. And that just means I can place myself anywhere in a straight line within 10 inches. So if I see something, it's within 10 inches upwards, I zip up there and that's my turn. Or for wall running and parkouring, if you have light enough armor to allow you to do that, you can move up vertical surfaces at the same speed as you move up horizontal surfaces during your move. So you can make like rapid changes in elevation and make these kinds of motions where you can use super dense, super vertical terrain without literally preventing the gameplay from getting anywhere. Like if you could, fight in a built-up city and access the roof, and that sniper on the roof isn't stuck there forever because they could jump down or zip down if they needed to on their rocket boots or something. That's the kind of design pattern.
So is the mobility aspect, is it limited towards gear? Like you've got skirmisher frame, mobility frame, which gives you grapple and wall run or leap as like action maneuvers or maneuver actions. Is that also available to just like general Joe Schmo grunt that may not have this kind of equipment or gear? Are they able to get a similar amount of mobility out of it, or is it reduced, or is it just non-existent? How does it kind of how does your range of disparity, how broad is that?
It's pretty wide, mostly based on classifications of kind of how it is. So that armor that's not mobile that you give to somebody that might be cheap or expensive is bulky, so you have a ton of armor. It makes you more protected. Mm-hmm. Or you might value to have a mobility element where you've got all these abilities in the armor you've assigned somebody, but now they're a little bit more flimsy, so they need to kind of hit and run a little bit more. They need to be more tactical. And some mixture of that can really help out because, like I mentioned before, that there's this maneuver element where if you outmaneuver an enemy model, you get advantages against it. Like if you're at higher ground, or if you have 2 or more models who are very close to it shooting, it's kind of caught in a crossfire and suffers penalties. This is a way to continue to add more variety to the game. Or if you really want to play it one way, you can just bulk up with a phalanx of ultra armored unmobile dudes and try to steamroll your way through more guerrilla warfare-ish opponents.
Okay, so it really kind of gives you a variety of options as far as maybe play style or models that you might like in order to put on the table to represent different faction types or things like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the faction types there's 7 of them, and they're kind of based on general archetypes. So you can have, for example, like stealthy sniper, saboteur, skirmish guys as one faction, and it's we've kind of given them a story and a plot as kind of these hunter mercenary guys. Or you can have these armored militants who fight in close formation and have a very, very organized way of battle. And that's a completely different kind of playstyle that fits different sorts of models.
All right. Do you have any kind of go into depth a little bit more on kind of your factions and what's represented? Like, do you have like techno barbarian type folks, or do you have space ninjas, since that tends to be pretty popular? Like, how deep down the rabbit hole do your factions go?
So basically, we have 7 factions, and each one of them has a number of classes, and that's how you can kind of assign, this kind of model should be a rookie, or this model is a tech expert, or perhaps like some kind of specialist or a sniper or the leader type. And they vary, again, based on their faction as to like what makes them unique. So the 7 factions right now are, first of all, is the Techno Mads, and they're kind of styled as any sort of nomadic skirmishing survivor that's living in this industrial technical wasteland that the world is. And that can be themed anywhere from they are your Dune Fremen, or your kind of Horizon Zero Dawn survivors who strapped on power armor they don't understand, or they can be Lord Humongous's troops, basically, who are savages and kind of flamethrower people for fun. They can be anywhere there, and their main characteristics is they're scrappy and survivalists, and they kind of improvise. And so their classes correspond with that gameplay. Another one is Zone Stalkers, who are inspired by Stalker and kind of military-themed like special forces guys, or different sorts of very hidden stealthy ninjas who rely on stealth, mobility, and taking the first shot or first melee attack to kind of get their advantage on ambushing people. So their universal rule is that they can't be attacked from beyond 12 inches until basically they raise the alarm, until they do something or get spotted by opponents getting within 12 inches of them first. So that way they can try to kind of fight for superior positions. We've got a couple of other ones which I can continue to go through quickly, like the Reclaimers, who are your Brotherhood of Steel type armored knights, or some kind of space marine-ish figure. I don't even know what those could be in minis gaming at all. Or even like Starship Troopers, which they're military guys who have the ability that when they're in close formation, they can spot targets for each other, and they've got heavy armor, and they're not so much about tricks as much as about kind of patrioting their way through the enemy with firepower and chunky armor. Then we've got kind of more interesting, weirder factions. Like we've got this robot faction called Nth Gen, and they're your sort of hive-minded robot team where they have a super powerful prototype, and that's their leader model, where everyone's stats are based on how good he is. So the more you buff him, all of the minions and earlier versions get better. And so they can be built as like kind of cyborg ninjas, as well as, Terminators, or with the models we got were kind of, techno samurai robots who've discovered in the fluff a little bit how logical honor and melee prowess is in their crazy world. Next up, so we got 3 more, are Morlocks, and these are mutant creatures which kind of are human hybrids, and they can represent things like predators or any sort of space alien kind of beast that you can come across because of this kind of strange DNA plus humanoid DNA. And their idea is that all their guys are very, very flexible. You can choose their stat line more freely, and they have very much of a kind of hodgepodge of different biological capabilities ones, where you got little skinky fast guys and giant hulking dudes, and a wider range of what that can look like. We have the Exanthropes, which is this cyborg Superman faction of people who've discovered transhuman biotech and augmentations to make themselves more capable than they previously were. And so their theme, they can be certainly space ninjas, as much as they can be kind of ancient cults with all these powers, and they can support themselves with swarms of drones to compensate for having fewer but more powerful and more faster warriors. And the last one are called Tropics, and they are kind of nano reanimated undead who have been taken biological parts and fused with machinery. And so any model that kind of fits in this horror theme can work with them, such as kind of xenomorphs or the guys from Dead Space, or even kind of more generic undead with a big old scary buzzsaw strapped to them. And their idea is they kind of ambush in a close quarter sort of way where they appear where they're not expected. And that gives you that sort of feeling like in Aliens where these heavily armed Marines are getting picked off one at a time. But when they do get a shot, these guys explode. And they got the cool ability of when they encounter downed opponents, they can sample some of their DNA and grow more powerful over the campaign and evolve into kind of more terrifying forms. So yeah, that's the kind of the gist of it. A lot of words there, but it's been a real treat to kind of develop all these groups, do art for them, see how they fit in with existing models, and then give them diverse rules.
You definitely kind of run the gamut as far as your options there, and kind of what kind of accessibility you've got as far as your factions and style and flavor, I guess would be what I'd use. So out of curiosity, you mentioned your kind of classes tend to dictate what faction things tend to be a part of. Is there possibility for the other way around? Are you restricted to those factions, or can you mix classes together from different factions in order to get a little bit more variety, or is that just something that's not quite there yet?
That's not something that's in there quite yet. For now, we've kind of like stuck to you're within this faction with a couple of sort of mercenary-ish options for things like, you've hijacked a robot from one of these local abandoned automated factories that have been working still for 10,000 years. Sure, you have this kind of powerful robot, or you've got like a mercenary mech pilot or something to give you a little bit more variety if that's kind of how you want to mix it in. In the future, we're thinking of different ways to perhaps mix that up. But for now, this is the aim of the game, is to provide like this experience.
That makes sense. And you've spoken a lot already about how narrative is driving a lot of your decisions with this. So there's nothing stopping people from mixing and matching as they see fit for their story in their own personal campaigns, because it's their game.
Exactly. Yeah. And one thing the faction system lets us do is, again, the difference between your Lord Humongous warriors and like noble Fremen type kind of tech survivalists would be illustrated by the fact that as the campaign continues, you can use your winning resources from winning games to kind of buy doctrines which represent how they behave, how they fight, and it kind of advance down different tech trees of what you think your faction cares about more. And that gives you different bonuses of kind of how they play.
Okay. And so speaking of kind of how your faction plays and what you might spend your points on, your resources on, model count immediately kind of comes to mind. Doing a horde swarmish kind of thing versus elite high tech. What's kind of your model range as far as count of models for somebody to get into the game?
The sweet spot right here is about 5 to 10, where most of our missions have a limit of deployment. So certain missions, which are perhaps a little bit more subtle, have you bring in 8 guys. Some of them, which are a little bit more combative, you bring up to 12 guys. And you can purchase upgrades, again, like that kind of doctrine system where if you have a swarm force, you can deploy more people because you've got better transportation, or that's just how you behave. And so we're trying to keep it that way because then every single model has value. But at the same time, you're not getting this meta of like 3 invincible people having perhaps too good of a chance or too weak of a chance against 15 or 20 nobody red shirts.
Makes sense.
Yeah. A lot of different kinds of styles we play tested to kind of arrive to that point.
So I was chuckling to myself a few minutes ago because you said, hey, you might find this robot in this old abandoned warehouse, and now you can add a robot or whatever. And all that ran through my head is, you power it up and it, says, "Good morning, Dave." And, turns into a whole different kind of, horror story game. But then it also made me think of, you talked about, then you also have co-op options, with AI play. And how does your AI play work? Because, that could actually be kind of a neat little segue for a game section is you did find this robot. Turns out this robot's insane and wants to destroy all humans. Or, something like that.
Yeah. And like thinking about co-op really was a core part of the game, since I think sometimes we get a little tired or need a break from competing against each other. Because some of these games are like, oh, I want to bring in someone new. I don't want to crush them or something. I want everyone to have a good time. Let's try some co-op. And minis games traditionally haven't really had a lot of that. So there's a couple of elements in Zone Raiders, one of which is that normally in the game, you might actually be attacked on the battlefield by NPC killer robots, as some of the objectives of some of the missions have of you, like you, for example, competing to exterminate a nest of robots designed to exterminate thinking beings. The others are the fact that we have outright dedicated co-op missions, which are special missions where you kind of combine half of one team and half of another to produce a small force that goes and walks through a mission such as, I need to rescue a prisoner. Therefore, I need to go across this predetermined map where I've labeled where things are, to go and activate a terminal to kind of release the prison doors. You need to go to the prison area where there might be a room, which you're encouraged to set up, get the prisoner, and then extract with them. And the way that the enemies work, though, is that you're kind of stealthing your way through a lot of these missions, where the enemies activate as a squad of foes marked under a blip token, marked 1 through 5 or 6 or something like that, and they move randomly around the map. Some blip tokens, for example, the door guards for the prison in the scenario, have the behavior where they hold their ground. They stand right there on the door. So you have to go and eliminate them or lure them away by some trick. And so you're trying to avoid these patrols. If you get caught because they run into you because their random roll takes them your direction, or you botch an ambush to try to kill them fast enough by kind of walking up, spotting them, revealing them, and not killing them before they can raise an alarm, then more of them converge on you. And the way that the models of the enemy groups work is that in this game, because you have 2 actions, they have a very, very simple behavior tree based on what kind of enemy they are. So a tactical enemy guard, soldier type, might go and have the behavior rule saying with its first action, it must seek cover that brings it into line of sight with a player or close to line of sight with a player. And its second action must be shoot the player. But if no player is available, go into Overwatch and try to ambush a player coming around the corner or something like that. And so that's fairly clear in the terms of there's no ambiguity as to what it's trying to do. And it always has a default behavior in case that's simply not possible. And the opposite of that is like an obvious wild beast, some kind of attack dog or drone, will just be charged straight as possible towards the nearest player that it can see, and therefore try to get into melee or something like that. That way you have a mix of different enemy behaviors that your players have to problem solve their way through.
Awesome. I like that. It's feels well thought out in execution and actions. So is there going to be, well, since I've been working on the Fallout Miniatures game, and that has a very heavy AI component in it for you to use, it has little cards in it that kind of say, hey, on this roll it's going to do these actions, da 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 da. Are you going to include or have an optional like card pack for that, or is that just a chart in the rule book? How does that work for driving the AI actions?
So in this case, I do respect what the Fallout guys did for especially including that and mixing up kind of what their models do. I decided to go a different route for a reason, which was that in that game, you have a small number of enemies and they might perform different kinds of behaviors. In this game, one of the ways we can really mix it up is that when you reveal an enemy blip, what's underneath is generated randomly by the scenario. So you might have a sniper and 2 shotgun guys and an attack dog type beast, or it could be 3 snipers and a commander. And so that way their behaviors as a group and based on what kind of models are in that enemy force that you've just revealed change how they behave. So that even though one guy with the gun, the rifle, might kind of behave the same way every turn, because you're fighting a different mixed lot of them, you have to deal with the fact that his behavior might be lay down suppression fire and debuff all of your players while melee guys appear. Or it could be, if there are sniper guys in that squad, that he's debuffing you with a suppressing fire, and that lets the snipers get really easy shots. And so you're kind of dealing with the enemy squad as the problem rather than each turn being different. And to achieve this, that means that there is a straightforward table in the book on the behaviors of each type of enemy model.
Okay. Awesome. And I mean, a table in a book isn't necessarily a bad thing when it's outlining all the different actions. that, like you said, handed to the Fallout guys because those cards are neat. But, it could easily, what they really did was they made their rulebooks as small as possible. Where do you have to put all that info if you're doing that?
Right. And in this case, right. And in this case, if you print yourself a 1-page sheet, you have a reference sheet, you have all the AI behaviors you need. And so it's pretty straightforward to reference that.
Exactly. So, it's tit for tat, one way or the other. None is necessarily better than the other. All right. I had another question and it just ran away. Robin, save me. What was I thinking?
Curse those evasive questions.
I know.
Talking about asymmetric missions and cooperative play and all that kind of stuff. I mean, how does I know Nick likes to know how many missions are in a book. So how many co-op missions do you have? How many versus missions? How many kind of pre-built storylines do you have kind of ready to go out of the box?
Sounds good. So this one's interesting. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with the PC game XCOM in terms of the fact that it has a very powerful strategic layer.
Otherwise known as Digital Infinity.
Absolutely, right? but part of what that makes that game cool is that you're playing for more than just this one battle. You might be like, oh, I'm going to lose this battle. But as long as I can steal this technology, I can start producing plasma guns next battle. And that's what's important, right? And so those are the kind of decisions where you tie the strategic layer together with the tactical layer I want to achieve. And so there are 11 separate missions for kind of versus play. But in reality, that means there are 121 because each player chooses their mission and then you mush them together. So that means there's 121 combinations of missions in that case, where if you want to go and say, I need resources, so I should do the scavenging mission. That means you place in the center of the board a scattering of tokens representing kind of useful loot that you're supposed to try to make off with. And let's say your opponent wants intel and to research some of your technology and perhaps be able to get some of your team's weapons. Well, they're going to play a capture mission where their goal is to go and take out one of your leaders and to drag them off the board to be interrogated. And whoever gets more of their objectives first is the winner. So therefore, if both of you are trying the same mission, it's straightforward. It's like a normal game where, you're both doing the same thing. But if you both had privately chosen before the battle different missions, then revealed them during setup, then you have completely different objectives, and that might put unexpected wrinkles in how you approach yours. And that's what I really wanted to achieve with the versus mode. With co-op, there's currently in the book 3 example missions, and their main purpose is to get some samples down to kind of get this play going, to go and show you how co-op can work. One thing we are planning and have unlocked as stretch goals are additional missions, and we're closing in on a stretch goal for an additional narrative campaign, which would be a branching story campaign, which is played co-op or solo, where you kind of go through the different missions and the results, choose what mission you get next.
That's really awesome. I like the idea of you versus your opponent. You choose a mission. You each privately choose a mission beforehand, and then you come to the table, and reveal hey, this is what I'm doing. It does make the game a lot more dynamic and in some ways a little bit more realistic. I've played some games where, it kind of doesn't make sense that, I'm here doing this other than it's the game that we agreed on to play, but it doesn't necessarily benefit my, my faction, my team, my unit. So, that does strike the chord of interesting in there.
Exactly. And although you can pick your mission, you might think maybe some missions are better for some factions because maybe a mission requires speed. You might want to always pick the speed mission. That's not always a good idea because then you won't get the rewards that the other kinds of missions give you. And at the same time, your opponent's mission might put a crinkle in that because perhaps one of their opponent's missions might just place NPC turrets on the board, which will shoot at anybody running there. So you have to take it slow to disarm the turrets first, or these kinds of situations.
So how have you found the task of balancing some of those things, especially, you mentioned like turrets to slow somebody down and you end up having to artificially slow down to disable and things like that. Well, I asked this from the perspective of I've seen some games try to do you choose your own mission, and they have some balance issues based off of like speed. Mm-hmm. A faction who is very fast and nimble and has a high mobility ends up choosing something that takes them 48 inches across the board at any given time. Versus an army or a faction that might be a little bit slower and trying to stay together a little bit more. And as a result, player A kind of runs circles around player B, and there's a feeling of disparity as far as being able to accomplish the task, accomplish the mission. There's been a couple games that I feel like have had that kind of issue. Did you have some of those kinds of difficulties? And if so, how do you feel like you kind of address some of those? Or how did you address them?
I think I've played at least one of the ones I could almost hear you not say the name of. Yeah, no, I understand that issue entirely. One part of that is that by keeping a lot of the core stats and the core abilities common, you could, in theory, make any faction play in a given way if you really focus them hard enough in that direction.
Okay.
So that a certain playstyle is not like exclusive to the speed faction, for example. The differences then are kind of you try to solve the same problems with different tools. So that in one case, a faction might be physically faster in the sense of their guys move an extra inch a turn on average. But because they have a reduced access to, for example, the wall running gear, they have to take the ground floor a little bit more often, unless they want to run like lower level gear. The way we resolve that in practice, because there's a bit of practical element on that, is we thought about what are the craziest, cheesiest SKU lists we could possibly put together and played test rounds running these dumb lists of I want nothing but 12 guys with the speed boostiest, flimsiest armor to just rush in there and try to do these speed objectives. Or I want nothing but 8 or 9 of the most expensive armor mounted on cheap dudes to try to just drown my opponent in toughness. And we found really that what came down to is that even mixing it up a little bit had much greater benefits, because then, for example, with that toughness example, if you have to have like a sit down and bang out battle mission, like to secure the center of the area, like some of our missions, having some flankers actually to go and harass and provide bonuses to your team by outflanking the enemy was actually a huge a bonus over this kind of mono build one-way thinking. But that was countered by your opponent overpowering that scout and then picking your guys apart. And so like kind of this arms race of how do I beat this tactic with a different tactic really came up.
Okay. Interesting.
Awesome. So zone runners or zone raiders is
that do a lot of running.
They also do a lot of running. It's true.
Yeah.
I hope most games do.
Yeah. Oh,
focus, Nick.
It apparently has been a day. I got down here and actually, I couldn't even remember who I talked to arrange for sitting down, because I've talked to like 6 different people about the podcast today. So I was going through all of my messages going, where is this? Who is I going to talk to? What? So I apologize. I suddenly have lost my marbles, apparently.
Who am I? Where am I?
I don't. I just figured those were existential crises of life, and I just pushed them off to the side.
That's why we have minis.
Exactly. So, Zone Raiders, it's on Kickstarter for a few more days. This episode will probably come out right around the end of it. So, what's next for Zone Raiders? You've got it funded. You're going to publish the book. What are you going to do once it is out there? So
the main thing is that because we wanted to, as a passion project and gift community, make a game like this and get it out there, the book is done. I have printed up some prototypes and showed them off at the Las Vegas Open just last weekend, and had some great results and kind of talked with folks. The goal is to get the print run going and get into people's hands as soon as possible. We have like a PDF level where we're going to get the PDF out the door pretty much as soon as we can, right after the Kickstarter, along with tokens and standee silhouettes, kind of like what you have in Infinity silhouettes, to go and be printed from a local shop, get them out the door going. After that, there's a lot of potential. So some of our unlocks are a promise and basically a free inclusion of expansions. we're very close to unlocking that narrative campaign expansion where you'll have branching structures and multiple new co-op campaigns. We're very close to unlocking 4 new factions for completely different styles of play. I'll spoil one right here. A group called the Moto Runners, who are basically a mech pilot squad, where you have guys who are driving around those cool, 50 millimeter based mech type models you may or may not have, and they can jump out of them and fight separately on foot if they need to and things like that. And afterwards, just seeing basically how the community accepts it. We can certainly consider and look forward to future expansion beyond that. But afterwards, the goal is to get Zone Raiders into regular sale.
Awesome. All right, so there is a roadmap of some sorts for post Kickstarter and advancing your story and your world.
Hey, I just saw the number go up, so I'm guessing Nick just hit pledge.
No, actually, I haven't. I mean, I have done that while I've been on a podcast more than once, but I haven't right now. I'm trying to stick to my rule: no more new stuff, or certain amounts of new stuff, but no more Kickstarters.
Yeah.
This is definitely one reason why I have sworn off any Kickstarter that involves a giant crate of miniatures that's going to arrive in my doorstep in 4 years. But I don't know about little ones, Well,
no, and that's been the hard part, is that there's been a lot of little things, and it wasn't a New Year's resolution. It was just a resolution of hey, I keep buying stuff, and as you pointed out, in the first 5 seconds of seeing me, I have a wall of shame, which, I mean, everyone does, but, what you don't see is the rest of the room of shame. And the room of shame expands into, basement of shame. And it's like I'm getting all these things, and I'm trying to do all of these projects, and it's getting overwhelming. I'm never playing anything, or I'm never consistently working on something, because there's always something new and shiny.
But you're always looking forward to it. That's the key with.
Well, I mean, I'm always looking forward to what's next and new and shiny, but then I look at all my other stuff and I, get all sad and, mopey and like, oh my God, I have so much stuff.
Well, see, that's the beauty of this particular Kickstarter, because the digital rule book is only $30.
You are right.
You can just download that and keep it on your hard drive until you're ready, or add it to an iPad or Kindle or something like that. Now, if you want to up your game, there's a hardcover rule back, or hardcover rule book, and then going on from there. But you don't have to worry about if your goal is not to add crates of stuff, then a nice little PDF fits that descriptor really nicely.
I mean, this is true, but have you ever heard of addiction?
Yeah, I know you're a poster child for that one, I think.
I mean, I have a feeling we're all enablers.
Totally.
Right. I'm like, I am trying to be strict, and you guys are like, yeah, but see, this is so super simple that everyone's doing it. Come on.
Yeah. To make it even easier for you, if you actually go to the website zoneraiders.com, no www in front of it. So if you're linking there from their Kickstarter page or something like that, the Kickstarter will automatically add that www in front of it. You got to remove that, and it'll take you actually to the page. You've got a demo PDF of a first encounter. So it gives you a breakdown of some of the rules. You've got a sample roster in there. But what I'm really kind of digging is your actual blog, where you've got breakdowns of your factions. You've got how to build your roster, your team. And you've got one of my favorites is a battle report between the Exanthropes and the Morlocks. And so you can get kind of a play-by-play of how all that stuff shakes out. And you get to see some of the art that's in the book. You get to see how things are laid out. You get to read some of the language that's in there and see how missions are figured out and that kind of fun stuff. I'm really kind of digging what you've got on your blog here and how you break it all down.
Thank you very much. It's been a year of doing all this stuff, and we're really proud of kind of the work that the various artists have contributed to this entire project.
Oh yeah, you've definitely got some. I I like a lot of the art. This faction art, especially, it's very colorful. It's very evocative, and it's just kind of got that just a real nice style to it, I think. And I also kind of got to give it to you. In your Kickstarter page and elsewhere, you do use the RN Studio samurai robot type models, which they're always just gorgeous models. And I'm happy to see somebody found a good use for them.
Those are everyone's favorites. I get probably as many questions about those as anything else.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you have any kind of any other last remarks, I suppose, about the campaign or the game or anything else you want to talk about?
I'd say that just honestly, it's been fantastic with how supportive the overall gaming community is, and how through kind of media like this or shows that we can all really come together and kind of meet people and have stuff in common from all around the country and around kind of every single group that we've been to. And that's been a real rewarding part of making this. So I really hope folks go and check it out. It's a Zone Raiders at Kickstarter, and, see if it's for you. We've got a couple of days left, and I would love to, get a message from anyone out there. And I'm more than happy, as you can tell, to gush nerd about minis games.
And are you publishing under your name or a company name?
I'm publishing under a small company, Fractal Basilisk Studios, LLC. And so that's just largely our little local shop. But perhaps in the future, who knows?
Well, it looks like your future is looking pretty deadly and skirmishy.
Lovely. That's a lovely thing to wish upon someone. I want your future to be full of deadly skirmishes. Goodbye.
Hey, as long as nobody gets hurt.
All right. So I know that Robin is kind of given everything away for where to find you, but if you want to take a minute or two to go ahead and do that as well. Again,
that's Zone Raiders at Kickstarter. You can find it with by just basically Googling Zone Raiders Kickstarter, or you can go to http:/zoneraiders.com. For whatever reason, www stopped working the other day. I'm going to go look at that literally right after this recording. But
everything froze in San Francisco, so
yeah, the internet pipes are all iced up at this point.
Yeah, you got to go breathe on them.
Yeah, and so we are the Kickstarter's ending on the 18th and 19th of February, so just a couple of days left at time of recording, and I really hope to see you all there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time, especially since this was last minute organized today. It has been delightful to meet you, have a chance to kind of nerd out, before and during the show. It's always enjoyable, and I hope to see more from you in the future.
Much the same. Fantastic, guys. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.